Welcome to Art Arcs, where every episode is an immersive dive into the heartbeat of the art world. I'm your host, Alex Drew, and today we are interviewing Jennifer Wright, a talented artist working in Sydney, Australia. She specializes in oil paintings of landscapes and abstraction, and her art has been featured in exhibitions all across New Zealand, Australia, and England.
Oh, Miss Wright, can you introduce yourself?
Sure. My name is Jennifer Wright. I'm originally from Auckland in New Zealand. I lived there until I was about 18, and then I headed over to New York University. I did my first 2 degrees there. I studied finance and accounting, and then I minored in fine art. Alongside that, I was working in startups. So I've been working alongside school since I was about 18, more than 10 years ago now. Um, and I'm on break from what I am generally doing in this time, which is the
Mhm.
Schwarzman Scholarship. The Schwarzman Scholarship is a scholarship at Tsinghua University in Beijing. It's a master's in global affairs and it's fully paid for by a private equity CEO called Stephen Schwarzman. Uh, the type of art that I like doing, I would say mostly it's oil paint, but I really love that technology is providing a lot of new channels to express myself and my meanings. So I have been using a little bit more technologies to, uh, I guess, convey those messages, and I hope to explore a lot of new technologies in my art in the future.
Okay, cool. Amazing. So I've heard you've been to Tsinghua University. That's very nice because we are very nearby. And since you've been there, I assume that you have some knowledge on the overall Chinese art. And I was wondering on your personal opinion on it, because I think it's really good nowadays, the art in China, but it's just not like it's not been around the world yet, but there's a lot of potential for it to be really great. So what's your opinion?
Um, I mean, art in China is so broad. You've got the historic art, which I think is really interesting in itself. And it tends to follow much more structured rules about things like mediums. You see a lot of ink in historical Chinese art, in subject matter. So you see a lot of landscapes and a very particular type of landscape. Maybe you've seen, I'm sure you have seen a lot of the kind of mountainous, foggy
Yeah.
landscapes where they use a lot of negative space, and also where they feel very tranquil. But then modern Chinese art is quite interesting because I don't think you can really put it in a box. So I went to
Yeah.
Tizio Bar recently, and it was just like the most kind of eclectic combination of like all sorts of things.
Mhm.
Um, but I do think some of the leading Chinese art is starting to become recognized globally. There's this
Mhm.
really cool Chinese focus gallery here in Sydney actually called White Rabbit. And it's this pretty large gallery which only features Chinese artworks. And
Mhm.
I I have to say the artwork there feels really world class. Um, Better than a lot of
Yeah.
the art that I've seen, even say in like the New York MoMA, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree. I think I've been to both of them, and yeah, it's they are both pretty good. I've heard you've been using technologies, so can you maybe extend more on how you incorporate that into your art style?
Yeah, so one way that I sometimes use technology if I'm doing a really large artwork is while I like to freehand draw most of my artwork, if I'm doing a particularly
Oh.
large piece, I'll use a projector.
Mhm.
And what this does is it helps me maintain all the proportions well. I mean, an alternative is gridding, which maybe you've used before, to keep the proportions
Oh,
broadly
yeah, yeah,
right.
yeah. Yeah, I've done that before.
Um, so sometimes I would do that for my larger pieces. I've also I think one of the biggest challenges with creating art is making really high quality references for what you want to make. And I think that if you have a high quality reference, it's like 100 times easier to make a really high quality end piece. Um, but if
Yeah.
you're kind of cobbling together different things from Google and like the lighting and the perspective is slightly off, like it's quite easy to end up with a final piece which just feels disjointed and uncohesive, even though it's kind of hard for the viewer to understand why. But it's just like the lighting and the shadows are not quite right, or the perspective's a little different from all the things that you've cobbled together. So I think that AI can be really good to generate cohesive references. Um, and then I'm also quite interested in robotics, and 3D
Oh,
printing. And this is not a skill that I have yet, but I think going forward in my art, I would really love to incorporate robotics. Um, and AI not in the sense of like image generation, so like stable diffusion, but um, AI in the way that let's say I wanted to make like a little robot and then use like a AI API to make like a custom chatbot so that AI can uh like engage with me in a way that I want. And I think that like that's kind of art in a way as well.
yeah, that's
Um
installation.
yeah, exactly.
Um, I've seen like your website and there's a part with like a lot of photos on it. Is it photos or paintings? I'm not sure. So it's about New Zealand. I think you used AI in that, right?
Yeah, I did. So that was a
That's really
series I
interesting.
made. Oh, thank you. Yeah, I think I used Midjourney like 3 for that one, and then like a
Oh,
combination of Photoshop. So right now you can use, I think Midjourney is like Midjourney 5 or 6, and so you could probably get like comparable images just from like a prompt. But at that time, Midjourney was like pretty poor, and the some of the faces and the hands and the teeth, they were just like really kind of messed up. So I generated kind of like a base from Midjourney 3 and then like chucked them all in Photoshop and kind of like tried to make them a little better.
yeah, I've used Midjourney before. It's really interesting, but sometimes still they're robots. Okay, let's move on to the next question. So, themes. What themes or messages do you aim to convey through your art? And what impacts do you want your art to have on people?
Um, I think there's two reasons I do art. One of them is just for myself because I find it really therapeutic.
Right.
So I really enjoy like I don't know like a quiet evening and I'll just have like my little art set up and I'll like paint and I'll have like my Netflix on the side. And I think that's just like one of my favorite ways to spend an evening. So that's kind of painting for myself. But then sometimes if I have like ideas that I want to convey, or even just like beauty that I want to convey, like an idea for something that I think is really beautiful and I kind of want to share it and get it out of my head, then yeah, I would say those are the two reasons I make art. In terms of specific messaging, I made this really big one, which has like these like three kind of ethereal women in it, and then some kind of like technological components around them. And I made that about a year ago
Wow.
when I was very, I guess, excited by the possibilities of like technology augmenting human capabilities and kind of what that might
Mhm.
look like and how we can kind of like coexist. Yeah.
Yeah, I've heard you said beauty. That's very interesting because now the modern world, there is different kinds of art. Do you think that like in order for art to be good, it has to visually appeal?
Oh, definitely not. As I get older, I find myself more attracted to absurdism. Um, so like what are some like kind of slightly absurdist artists that I like? Like Dali, like Salvador
Oh,
Dali.
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Cool, cool. Um, let's move on to your art style. So, um, I've I've noticed that like a huge chunk of your artwork is in surrealism, and I can also see some traces of like other artists maybe inspire you to do them. So I was wondering like why you're doing this and like uh why you choose to do surrealism and what do you want to bring that to the others and who inspired you?
Hmm. So I think Salvador Dali is definitely a big influence. I'm actually like pretty inspired by literature as well and the world,
Oh,
so I'm not just inspired by artists. So um, I I quite like this author called John Updike. And
mhm.
he writes in this really poetic way. I think he might be one of the only authors ever to have won two Pulitzers. But he writes about so he won like two Pulitzer Prizes, I believe, for the series of artwork. Oh, sorry, for the series of books about this guy called Rabbit. And it kind of
Mm.
describes this guy's very kind of like mundane, disillusioned life, but it's kind of like the way that he writes is like extremely poetic and beautiful. So a lot of the like visual imagery that is like written about in like Updike's books. I I really enjoy. And I think there was like one line in there where he talks about these like tattered purple irises. And I was like, oh wow, that's like a really beautiful image. And then Van Gogh also did like a series on like purple irises. And I was like, oh, like,
Oh yeah.
maybe I should do my own. And so I did this like three series of like these kind of like abstract like iris forms that are kind of like growing out of the canvas and like expanding over the
Whoa,
frames.
that's interesting. Um, I've also noticed like a huge, not huge, like a bunch of human portraits drawn, and they're drawn in like high saturation of colors and not necessarily like very realistic, but like you have like a lot of loose strokes. What are you trying to convey in this project?
So for that, I painted that because a gallery nearby in Darlinghurst offered me a like portion of their gallery to like put my works on. And so I wanted to create a cohesive series to kind of like fill that space. And one thing that I quite enjoy is just like people and expressive faces and works that make you kind of in a similar way to I think that people enjoy people watching from like a cafe and you like see people go by
Oh
and
yeah.
you kind of like consider like oh like I wonder what their life is like. I kind of like that in art as well when you like see a picture of someone and you're like oh like I wonder like what they would be like as a person or what their life is like. So yeah, that was that series. Why I use such vibrant colors was it was a commercial gallery and basically they were selling my artworks. So I wanted to make them visually appealing and I wanted to create kind of a statement piece. So when people walked into a room, the pieces brought a sort of energy to the room. And I
Yeah,
think you can
definitely.
get that with
It's
really
very
vibrant
strong.
colors. Yeah. And I ended up selling a bunch of them, which was, I think, a good indicator that people have
That
at
is
least
fantastic.
wanted them in their homes.
Yeah, I would want one. I've done like a similar project myself as well. I held an exhibition in my previous school and I painted like 13 portraits of my teachers and people around me and people like on the street, like janitors and stuff. So it's really interesting painting people in different jobs and then like observing their world. Yeah, it's really cool and people are really happy after the result. So yeah, I really love the idea of the portraits. Um, okay, now moving on to our last section, which is about art society. So what will be your prediction on the next trend of art in the future? Will art become more abstract and philosophical, or will the era of simple beauty return? Like people focusing more on how things look alike. Yeah.
Oh, I think that society has broadly become less restrained by unnecessary social expectations than ever before. And I think that trend will probably continue. So like looking back historically, there were very kind of strict societal expectations about like what was art and what wasn't. So if you go back like 500 years ago, like
Yeah.
what was considered a masterpiece was like it kind of had to fall into quite strict criteria. So for example, it had to have a high level of technical ability. It was probably a like a picture of a human or like a landscape in at least a semi-realistic style. Um, and probably quite like naturalistic too. Um, but like maybe with some like religious themes or something, but like broadly it was a lot stricter of like what art was considered and what wasn't. And then today, the kind of limitations on like what can be considered art almost don't exist. I think you can just call anything art if like your intention is that it's art, or if it creates dialogue. And I think there's been like a lot of debate about this. So, for example, there was this one artist who was commissioned by a museum to create like a big art piece hanging on their wall. And the guy just put up a blank canvas, and on the back it said, "Take the money and run." Um, and so the museum actually took him to court for it and won. But it really made waves in the art world because it did create a lot of discussion about like what art is and what it isn't. And I think just the fact that it created so much dialogue about that means that, in my opinion, means that it is art because we're talking about it right now. And like if he had just painted like, you know, some random portrait or, you know, anything else, then we wouldn't. Um, Another example I think is like Rothko. So this
Mm,
guy
yeah.
Rothko creates do you know Rothko?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So I mean if people aren't familiar with Rothko, I'll just like quickly outline basically he kind of does like a couple of colors like contrasting on a canvas and there's like very little technical skill there, but he sells his artworks for like tens of millions of dollars. Um so, you know, like 500 years ago, they'll probably be thrown in the trash. Um, um, and oh, so, and then the last example I'll give about like modern art is probably my favorite modern artwork.
Hmm.
Um, so in the Sydney Art Gallery, there was this like huge bunker, which used to be an oil reserve. And it's probably like it's massive. It's probably like 2,000 square meters, and it's just like this dark underground bunker, and the ceilings are like 30 feet high. And inside there are these huge like amalgamations of like concrete and like machinery and robotics and crystals and like
Oh.
honeycomb and just like all of these like kind of random different things put together. And what they did is they um, used a computer to simulate how their installation would be impacted over different time spans and different environments. So, for example, like 5,000 years from now, if this installation was left like on the surface of Jupiter, like how would this look? How would this be affected?
That is very
Or
creative.
yeah, or like a million years from now, if this was left at the bottom of the ocean, like how would this be like affected? And then they just kind of use that like technological modeling of conditions and different like gravities and different like minerals to uh like to form the basis of this like of what this art should look like, and then they actually built it and like put it in this like huge bunker. Um, So yeah, anyway, I think like that's an example of like how technology um is currently being used to like really expand the boundaries of like what art is and like the meaning that can be communicated from it. Like that's almost like a scientific perspective on art, which like makes people think about or like expands people's kind of like thought horizons to um like like different regions of the solar system that they probably hadn't considered, and like also different time scales that they'd probably never thought of. Like, like who thinks about something like a million years from now and like what that would look like at the bottom of the ocean kind of thing.
Yeah, so I agree. Like art today is just about like taking more new steps, innovating more, and then like doing something different from you and other, for example, Rothko. Like a lot of modern artists, though, like they seem easy, but they are not very easy because they've invented something that others have never done before. And most of the time, like the sensational effect it gives is very powerful. Um, but my prediction for the future is kind of like I think it might kind of return to the simple beauty because like it's already kind of running out. Like the artwork cannot be more crazy. Now there's is already like no standard for art. So it's really interesting what's gonna happen in the future.
For
So
sure. Yeah. I think there's also this interesting this kind of interesting evolution of beauty because right now on social media, um, people's social medias are like inundated with these like perfect faces, and a lot of it is like made perfect through filters, or even deep fakes, or like even just fully like AI generated avatars. And so this kind of idea of like I think like a type of perfect beauty is like now almost becoming like commonplace and people are becoming like overexposed. And I think like we're almost seeing that like imperfection and like uniqueness and kind of like uh I guess like flaws are like sometimes like seen as like oh more interesting and therefore like preferable to just like stock standard like K-pop template star where they half their faces look extremely similar or like the like skinny white girl influencer with like big blue eyes and a little buttered nose and it's like we've just like seen it all like 100 times already.
yeah, definitely. I will say like the flaws on you are actually what makes you unique and perfect. So like that used to be in the case in the past of um the Western art history. Like I remember like people in the past painted figures with like maybe a woman was like around their cheek or like with around their body, but and like some muscles, but like they are different. And I think the beauty standard has changed and it has changed from yeah in a bad way because it used to be more like diverse. Then like now there is just a fixed standard. Like you have to look like Barbie. It's very stupid, in my opinion. So okay, let's move on to the next question. Um, so I know you've learned a lot of art in your college, and I'm also learning art in my high school. What is your opinion on like the education of art? Do you think the art that's taught in these schools today can actually help one to become like a real artist?
This is a great question, and I think art teachers are in a really tough position because on one hand, you don't want to look at something like that blank canvas or a Rothko, just like three basic colors, or like a Jackson Pollock splatter of paint, um, or even like Van Gogh. Back in his day, people all just completely wrote off his art, and he died thinking that he was a total failure. You know, you don't want to be the person that looks at a piece of artwork that isn't like highly technically skilled and write it off as a worthless piece of art. And I think that that's the struggle that a lot of art teachers have, because on one hand, they can teach the actual like artistic techniques to create highly technically skilled artists that can paint, say, like photorealistic art. But it's interesting because the art which is most prized in the like I guess like high market art is like leans more towards abstract, and hyperrealism is like relatively significantly cheaper. And also honestly not that difficult to do. So like in the professional art world, a lot of people, if they use, say, like, actually, I think most hyperrealistic artists will either use small grids or transfer paper or a projector to make sure that their art looks exactly like a photo. And then after that, they kind of can like paint on top of that. And that's totally fine. That's like very accepted practice in professional art, but it's not valued as highly as like some of these more like abstract ideas. So like I guess to your question of like can art teachers teach good art? Um I guess like I don't really envy them because um you know, on one hand you can just have like a bunch of students who like don't care and hand in like a bunch of blank canvases, and like you can fail them, but then how is that different to the, you know, like museum blank canvas art or like a Rothko or something, right?
Yeah. So I kind of agree with you because like I've had different art teachers and some of them really encourage your like you to develop on your self-exploration. Others focus on your techniques. So yeah, it's really interesting and it depends on the teachers. I've interviewed another artist before and her opinion is like what she learned at RISD didn't contribute to her art style at all. So it's very interesting. Um
I I would say 3 or 4 of the art classes I did at NYU Steinhardt did not contribute to my art style at all, but one of them massively did.
yeah, because since people are not like drawing realistic right now, the majority are not. So I don't really get the point of teaching students to draw like a photo. Instead,
Yeah.
I think our education should focus on how students should explore more on themselves. You've
Mhm.
mentioned you had that class that contributed to your art style. Can you like talk about it more?
Yeah, yeah. So my professor was a guy called Maliko Magosi, and his focuses on the experience of being a Black American in the current American society. And so a lot of what he paints is Black Americans in different contexts, um, and kind of how society like influences their development and their perspective, and their lived experience. So Magosi paints in a kind of a exaggerated hyperrealistic style, or like kind of a stylized hyperrealism with like very bold colors, and a lot of symbolism, and
Mhm.
also on like a very kind of like grandiose scale. So his artworks are like 10 meters high and like 10 meters
Oh,
wide.
it's
Um,
fascinating.
and yeah, and he was really, so first he forced me to start painting with oil paints, which was like
That's
I really didn't
that's a
want to do
really
that,
smart move.
honestly. Yeah. Yeah, that like massively, that was a like a huge like benefit to my ability. And then he was also like very focused on teaching me how to draw hyperrealism so that I could if I wanted to. Because
Oh,
previously, like he didn't say like you have to use this, but he said like you have to know how to do this. Um And I'm really, really thankful for that because it kind of equipped me to be so much more um, like to have such a more powerful tool to express what I wanted to do. Whereas before, maybe if I wanted to create something which like very realistic and kind of convincing, I would not have the artistic ability to do that. Yeah.
True. I've had these classes and it literally turns you into like a camera. You can just sit publicly and then start sketching a person and then they look exactly the same. It's really interesting. So now, last but not least, what do you think is do you think the purpose of art has changed?
Oh, yeah, I definitely think so. I think with the first with the invention of the camera, the focus of art shifted from being required to capture a moment to being kind of a little bit more liberated to like personal expression. Because
Mm-hmm.
now cameras could, be cheaply used to capture the moment. So there's no need to have a very like expensive and like arduous painting process for that.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that was the first thing. And then I think now with AI, we're seeing another shift where if you want to create um a image which like expresses what you want, AI can kind of do that digitally very quickly. But what technology still can't do is use like an oil medium, so like an oil paint medium. Maybe soon it will be able to do that probably, but like for now it can't. Um, and I think like what we can see is this like market of people looking at like oil paintings as like a sorry, as kind of oh my gosh. Hello. Oh, sorry, that's my that's my boyfriend trying to come in. Um, so I think what we can see is like in current markets, you can often buy like a handmade version of the same thing, but it's at a premium price. Um, so for example, if you want to buy a piece of clothing, you can either go to like Shein or you can go to H&M and you can get like a reasonably like decent looking piece of clothing, or you can go to like a person who like hand makes the clothes. Let's say like a boutique designer and they have like their own little like sewing workshop or whatever, and the prices are like 10x as expensive. But some people value that kind of like that process, that like handmade process and that like history of the garment. So I think like we'll probably see something similar in art, where technologically you can like have these like things which express like beauty or express a message created very easily digitally. But if you value the kind of like human element and the human process, then I believe people will still be willing to pay the premium for art.
Yeah, that's true. Like AI can like it maybe one day they can like just generate photos that look exactly real life, but you still need to input your idea. So still as artists, like it's most important to like know what you're doing and then like have a style. So yeah. Okay, so that's pretty much it. Thank you so much.
Okay.